Hello, I'm Connor Hand, and this is Raw's coverage of the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor. Been practicing that all day. And we're delighted to have here the current leader of the opposition in the council in Solihull, Mr. James Burn.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hello, that's no relation to Mr. Burns, thankfully, from The Simpsons.
No S, sadly, although I do envy him his haircut and his clever finger movements.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So the first question I guess we'd have to begin on is to first give some context as to the West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor. This was rejected in Birmingham and it was rejected in Coventry when put to a vote in 2011.
I think so, in Stoke as well before that, yeah.
So I guess the first underlying question is, why do the West Midlands need a mayor?
That's a really good question, isn't it? Well, the more practical answer is the West Midlands needs a mayor because government said if you want to have power back, if you want to be able to make decisions for yourselves again, you have to have a mayor or we won't give you power back. That's the honest answer. So we weren't given a great deal of choice.
And would you just like to elaborate on why they're telling you to make this choice?
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I don't really know. So there are different schools of thought, but no one really knows. So George Osborne, when he was Chancellor, was very attached to the idea of mayors. It's something he pushed through, and so I'm afraid you probably have to ask him why he loves them so much. I'm not entirely sure.
Well, when we have George on here, I'm
next
sure
week.
I'm sure we'll attack him on that.
He's not so busy these days. So he's probably got the time.
Well, thankfully, he's not so busy these days.
Yes, indeed.
If you are elected as mayor, what type of relationship would you look to forge with Warwick University? Indeed, do you feel there needs to be a relationship between the mayor and the university?
Yeah, absolutely. So historically, what the West Mids was really good at and what started the Industrial Revolution was actually people with skills, people with discoveries, particularly from the arts and the sciences, talking to people in the industry about how they could do things quicker, faster, better, etc., and make lives better for people. So from that came the invention of the modern chemical industry, of the integrated circuit board, of the steam engine, of romantic poetry, all kinds of stuff. And so at the moment we've got too much information kind of locked up in universities, and without enough of it getting out to people's lives and into industry. So absolutely we need a really solid relationship. And I think more than that, this is a mayor for everyone. You know, this mayor needs to serve students as well. And the problem we have is because students don't often vote in elections where they're at university, politicians can fairly easily ignore what students want, and their lives could be a lot better if they're more politically involved.
You say there that the mayor needs to represent everyone within this area. Now, the West Midlands, as you touched on in a very informative talk that you have just given as affiliated with the Green Party, West Midlands is the area which most unanimously voted for Brexit. So the question I'd like to ask you first is, which way did you vote in the EU referendum, and how do you plan on serving such a strong Brexit vote?
It's a funny one, isn't it? So today Theresa May has announced it will be a hard Brexit, but if you look at surveys about what people voted for, and when people voted Brexit, were they actually voting to come out of the single market or not, things get really complicated. I think in retrospect all politicians would agree we should have probably had a better question that we were asked. So I mean, I live in an area, and I represent as a councillor an area that voted about 75% Brexit itself. Wow. So and I'm a social worker by trade, and pretty much all the areas I've ever worked in have voted Brexit. So I guess I understand what's going on, and I think we need to be really careful because it's very easy to assume people who voted Brexit are kind of a homogenous whole who voted Brexit for certain reasons, and actually it was a vote of pain. It was a vote that said my daughter can't get a house. It was a vote that said my son is stuck in a 0 hours contract, minimum wage job at best, and he can't get on. Things can't get much worse. And I understand, because I live there, I represent there, I work there, I understand probably better than the other candidates what people there think, why, and what's going on for them. So I'm pretty confident I can represent them.
Having seen all that in your local area, did that lead you to vote Brexit, or did you personally vote to remain?
I personally voted, in honesty, reluctantly remain, because I think the EU has big problems and there's a whole lot of wasted money going about. And the problem is, both sides gave the same argument. It's quite funny. So both sides said, if you vote Brexit, the world will end. The other side said, if you vote Remain, the world will end. If you vote Brexit, the NHS will die. If you vote Remain, the NHS will die. And it became really hard to tell fact from fiction. And so in the end, as a social worker, again, in my view, problems in life start when we start to other people, when we start to say we are us, they are them, they are different from us, they aren't like us. And what tends to start happening then is we start to treat them worse than us because they're not us, they're someone else. So every time I have a chance to vote, to be with someone who's different from myself, to align myself with someone who's not like me, to be, I guess, almost part of a brotherhood with people, or a sisterhood with people who are different from me, it's a chance I will always take as a moral position, I guess. So in the end, that's pretty much why I voted Remain, because I think it's better to always be with people rather than against them.
Sticking to politics on a more national level, because obviously that's how most people do get their information fed to them through the media, for instance. Labour's move to the left under Jeremy Corbyn has raised some questions as to what the distinctions now are between Labour and the Green Party, and therefore some might argue that you are taking votes away from Labour, which ultimately are still fighting the Tories, which is the end goal, to stop their policies coming through.
I think if that were true, I would probably jump ship and join the Labour Party. I mean, I'm not an evangelist for any party. Like, if I felt another party had represented me better, and I would join. I'm by no means kind of tribal and attached. But I think there are two things. Firstly, I mean, the problem Corbyn has is he's leading a party, many of whom don't agree with him. People talk about there being two Labour parties now. So how sustainable that is and how it can lead is a difficult question. But I think also there are still remaining key differences. So Jeremy Corbyn's more industrialist, for example, so he more would argue for growth and that benefiting everybody. I would be saying actually the problem with industrial growth is how do you do that within your limits of having one planet, and also I'd really question that assumption that growth will benefit everybody. And I would say that under Labour we saw inequality rise and we need drastic steps to change it. I mean, the Green Party is fundamentally different because everyone else basically says we need to tweak the plans in different ways, left or right or whatever, and we're saying the plan is fundamentally corrupt and rotten and we need a new one. So I think we're still quite a long way from Labour, but I have friends in Labour, you know, I can sympathise. You
spoke there of Labour being split, as it were, between people who are sympathising with Corbyn and then those taking another approach. Your Labour counterpart in this election, Sean Simon, how do you feel you differ from him in terms of your political perspective?
It's a difficult one because for whatever reason, and I'll leave him to answer this, Sean has declined most media interviews and hasn't been to any hustings at all that I've been to so far. So I don't really know a huge amount about it, if I'm honest with you. As far as I'm aware, he's fairly centrist, as far as I know, which would put a fairly clear water between me and him. But I'm afraid he's been to so little that I don't have a great clue what he's standing for at the moment.
Why do you believe he's gone to so little media events and declined interviews? Do you think it's that difference with yourself, that he's perhaps wanting to satisfy everyone in as much as Corbynites by not playing to a centre image? Maybe? I've
heard lots of things, but what I would say is the big political parties have a lot of money, they have a lot of staff, they do a lot of focus groups, and they will do whatever they think will get them a win in that election. Sadly, I don't have quite the same money or focus groups, so I haven't been able to look at that situation as I'm sure he has. I'm sure he's got good reasons, but he hasn't seen fit to share them with me, so who knows.
It's interesting you talk on the issue of campaign finance there, because one of the big issues you touched on in the talk that you've just given is effectively how, despite fundamentally the Greens' a message of the importance of environmental policy, a lot of it has to be framed in an economic argument in order for people to listen. Now, if we look throughout British history, when you had the sort of social democratic consensus after World War II, and how that was then shifted by the likes of the Adam Smith Institute come the 70s, do you believe that such a shift is on the horizon, or if not on the horizon, even possible in terms of shifting the narrative towards focus on environmental policy?
I'd answer that in two different ways. So I didn't join the Green Party for a long time because I thought they were a single issue party about the environment. And then I discovered that actually the Green Party started before climate change was a thing, before it was known about. The Green Party originally was called the People Party. So the Green Party, a common misconception is we're a single issue party who care just about the climate. But officially, green politics meant something. The media in the 80s came to use the word green to mean the environment. We were already called the Green Party by that stage, and everyone assumed we therefore were the Environment Party. So we've always been a party of a real broad church of policies. And yes, the environment's important to us, but I'm a social worker. I fundamentally joined the Green Party because of inequality, poverty and racism. So I'm probably not the best qualified to talk about the environment. However, we know we are on the brink of huge environmental change. We're seeing it all the time. It's going to start costing us a whole lot of money sooner rather than later. And at that point, and people can no longer have their head in the sand and their fingers in their ears, and you're going to start having to say, oh dear. And I think at that point, yes, the narrative will shift. But the problem is humans struggle to grasp things which are conceptual and things they've never seen before. And the problem with climate change is it's not something they've seen or can easily understand.
Yeah, it's not something tangible. Quite,
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, and I think one way environmentalists have not served us well is they have talked too much from abstracts and less from concrete examples of what could happen and what it could mean. I think what was really interesting is that the only time in recent years climate change was on the agenda strongly was when the Stern report came out, because he basically said this will cost a blooming fortune, and you suddenly had everyone who's rich, who has all the power, and push comes to shove, going, oh no, we better do something. But then the crash happened and it kind of went away.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about that, because a lot of people put the success of the Brexit campaign down to clear messages and being able to put simple points in a simple fashion.
Yep.
But is the Green Party naturally hamstrung then in terms of the environmental argument, because it is so difficult to simplify something that is so complex?
Well, the ward I represent, called Chelmsley Woods, is the ward in the country that's voted Green most strongly of any ward of all time. So 75% of people there voted Green last election, with all the other parties standing with the UKIP and Tories and Labour. Interestingly, before that, in 2008, Chelmsley Wood had voted BNP. So when the BNP won my ward, everyone said they're a bunch of racists. Now the Green Party are winning and have won every year for the last 5 or 6. No one is saying they're a bunch of ecologists or they're a bunch of environmentalists, which I find really interesting. And I think actually the Green Party has a lot to learn about communication. And as I said, I joined this party really around racism, around inequality, around poverty. There's a lot of issues to talk about, and we have to talk, like any party does, about what our audience is interested in, because quite frankly, in my ward, if you're struggling to get a house or a job or a winter coat, climate change isn't that high up on your agenda, and I think that should be respected and honoured, really. So yeah, you've got to talk about what people want to hear from you about, and we're lucky we've got such a broad church of policies to draw from that address pretty much every area.
You communicate that point very well, actually.
Thank you.
I told you I wasn't going to be Paxman before we started this. I just want to now take it back to this specific election, because what many people listening might not know yet is the fact that this role, the reason that it's combined authority is effectively because the police crimes commissioner is also being subsumed within the role.
He's not.
Isn't?
No, so when they set up the mayoral role, no, you're kind of right and wrong at the same time.
There's a lot of confusion around it.
There is a whole heap of confusion around it. I mean, I was talking to another mayoral candidate who I won't name today, and trying to help that person understand some of the confusion, because even we're confused.
Another mayoral candidate?
Yeah, it's dead confusing, and the goalposts change every 10 minutes. But basically, when the mayors were set up, the idea was the Police and Crime Commissioner, which is horribly unpopular, would be folded into the role. The problem they have is any power that gets folded into the role, the person losing that power has to agree to it. And our illustrious Police and Crime Commissioner has not agreed to fold into the role. So he is staying, I'm afraid, even though that was always the intention.
So there's confusion between the candidates as to what exactly this...
Well, it's madness. So, for example, the government will announce a new, what they call devolution deal, which is basically when they give powers to the combined authority the government currently have. I'm leader of the opposition on one of these councils. I will find out about 12 hours after the media what's in the new devolution deal. It's being negotiated in Westminster behind closed doors with no scrutiny at all, and it will just land. Could be tomorrow, could have happened an hour ago when I was here, and I won't know. That's how completely bonkers the whole thing is.
I'm just going to ask this question anyway on the Police Crime Commissioner. obviously the turnouts have been
Terrible.
Notoriously low for this for this category, as low as 10%.
Yeah.
So what I was going to ask you was along the lines of what mandate do you feel as West Midlands Combined Authority Mayor you would have to perform the role? But given that it may not actually be going to you, what I'd instead ask is what right does the current Police Crime Commissioner have to, with a mandate of as little as 10%?
I guess he would probably argue that the people elected the government who set it up, and they could have chosen to reject that government and didn't. I'm not a fan of the role. We didn't stand a candidate for the role because we thought it shouldn't exist. I think we should scrap it or fold it into the mayor personally. Maybe you should ask him. He likes talking. You should get him in. He loves to talk. So he's got a lovely car he can drive to meet you and everything on his rather large salary. So yeah, get him in.
Well, thank you very much, James Burn.
My absolute pleasure.
It has been a real pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Best of luck. In fact, do you want to just tell the listeners how they can register to vote?
Yep, the best way is to visit aboutmyvote.co.uk. You can register to vote either here, or if you don't live here full time at your home address, you can vote at one or the other. And it's important because actually, you guys are going to struggle to buy a house when you leave university. You'll be often living in quite rubbish rented accommodation, which we could do far more to regulate. So it's in your interest to get out there and vote.
Thank you very much, James Burn.
Hello, my name is James Burn. I'm proud and pleased to be the Green Party's candidate for West Midlands Mayor. I'm asking you to vote for me because I'm not tied to central government. I don't have to do what they say, unlike many of the other candidates, which means I can stand up for you and your rights at Westminster. And it means that I'm prepared to institute a new plan to address really difficult problems across our region. I'm not just proposing a few tweaks here and there. For students, I really want to see action to get affordable houses that you can buy when you graduate, to make sure more money goes into education, and we lobby hard to get rid of tuition fees, and to make sure we regulate the houses you live in to make sure they're better standards. I also want to see a war on loneliness for the 1 million older people in our country who have almost no social contact, and to make sure we really address the deep-seated inequality we see throughout the region. My name is Cllr James Burn. I'm the Green Party's candidate for the West Midlands Mayor election, and you're listening to Raw 12:51 AM.